Hello everyone and welcome to the Planning Game Podcast, your weekly podcast for real-world planning solutions to real-world planning problems. My name's John McDermott from Town Planning Expert. Let's get right into it.
Hello and welcome to a Building Progress and the Planning Game special. On this episode, we're doing a joint pod with myself and John McDermott. I say myself, this is going to be John's pod, and I'm hijacking it with my name over the back of it. So this is a Planning Game pod with a Building Progress guest questionnaire. But today, John is going to answer or give his top three sort of planning tips and three favourite planning games, if you will, that I think he's already said to me are going to be obscure. So you'll either be learning lots or have your mind blown or just be completely baffled by what planners think and what they do. So fire away, John, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, well, I suppose I better say hello to my listeners as well. So good evening, good afternoon. Good evening, good day, everyone. It is John McDermott of the Planning Game, and I'm with Simon Frewin of the Building Progress Pod. We're doing a joint link up. I've done one of these before, and it's going to be all rather amusing because Simon has set me questions. Normally it's me asking questions, but Simon has set me questions, so we'll see how this one goes. As always, like, subscribe, comment on the podcast. We only know what we're doing well when you tell us what we're doing badly. Right. Where do you want to go with this, buddy? Are we going planning tips first, or are we going planning permissions first? Where are we going?
Let's go planning tips first. Let's ease in the listeners in terms of some simple being the wrong word, but certainly some tips for you that you would advise your average developer or investor to potentially maximize some profit on a deal of any description that you like. Okay. I mean, it's a really broad question, this, but I'm sure you can narrow it down, a man of your skill.
Yeah, so we'll go with three, and the first one I'm going to do. So these are going to be obscure, but they come from what I call my safety tips. So the first one that always comes first is make sure you are doing what the government wants you to do. So what do I mean by that? The government has written us a beautiful document. It's 69 pages of riveting text called the National Planning Policy Framework. I did say I was going obscure, Simon. So the NPPF tells us certain things. You cannot, for example, build houses in the middle of an industrial estate because the NPPF tells us not to. You can't, for example, buy, and I have seen this, you wouldn't believe I have seen this. I've seen a guy email me a site, said, John, I've just bought this at auction. Good. How much did you buy it for? 55 grand. Where is it? Reading. Reading's in the home counties. One of the most expensive towns in the home counties.
It's got a bargain.
And you bought an acre of land for £55,000. What did it start at? 30 grand.
Oh, what could go wrong here?
What could go wrong? Shall we have a quick look at it? Oh, it's allocated as a park. There's swings and a slide. And a roundabout thing that breaks children's arms. There's that. And it was in the local plan as protected open space. That's not getting built on, you know, because the NPPF tells us you can't do that. Even down to things like Greenbelt. You know, there are rules governing both ways. The NPPF tells us you can't develop in the Greenbelt. And then also says you can if it meets one of 7 criteria, right? And it only has to
Yeah.
meet one of those 7 criteria. So the answer is simple. If you are looking in the right place, if you're looking at the national document and starting your journey with, what does this allow me to do? Then you're on the right footing, aren't you? Because you're suddenly looking at it from a point of view of, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting there as well is that your average novice, if you will, and I'll hold my hands up and being this fairly recently, is that you would go green belt no, and they probably wouldn't even look at anything. But then to say that you read the MPF and you've got a potential, one of the 7 criteria, you could find a little nook or a cranny to develop a nice project in space that you never thought you might be able to.
That's exactly it. One of my good friends, one of the mentees that I work with, I call him Mr. Greenbelt because that's all he does. He looks for Greenbelt and he looks for
Really?
sites within the 7 criteria. As
Yeah.
I've shown him where the criteria are, I've said do that.
Yeah.
And he's doing really well. He's finding sites. He's getting planning permission. He's about to flip one on with a GEV of £1 million.
Wow.
It works, and it works because he is using the rule, and that's the thing. It comes back to my favourite phrase, which I used on your last pod, which is, to play the game well, you have to learn the rules. Well, to play the game, you have to learn the rules. To play it well, you have to know where you can break them. The rule is you can't do development in the Greenbelt unless you know where you can break that rule.
Rules, yeah, perfect.
Now,
so
I know you've got a Greenbelt around Leeds, so
yeah, where we are, there's loads of it. So I've been scribbling down as you've been sort of talking here in terms of different ways of identifying those rules that we can, the bits and pieces we can develop on. Yeah, absolutely. So number 1 is obviously look through your
look through the NPPF and look through your local plan. Yep. Identify for yourself which rules are going to, and every local plan is different. The MPPF is universal in England, but every local plan is different. Look through the local plan and identify for yourself which rule is going to help you, which rule isn't, and use the NPPF as the big overarching document that helps you understand where you can and cannot push.
Perfect. Number 2.
Number 2 is easy. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I like this.
Do not reinvent the wheel. Planning authorities have personalities. We spoke about this in the last pod. And every planning authority will have its loved and hated form of development. It'll have a form of development it approves off the bat every single time. Easy, simple, straightforward. Get on with it. Do it now, please. Right? If you're in Croydon, for Croydon, that's knocking down bungalows and building 2.5-storey blocks of flats. It even has a policy for it.
Right? Really? Wow.
If you're in Plymouth, it's converting HMOs into flats. It has a policy for it. The policy actually says, we will support the conversion of HMOs to flats. Yeah. Get on with it.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
So
I have a friend who... So I have a friend that does title splits in around Wembley, where he lives, and sort of buys sort of big semis and turns them into sort of flats, which works really well in London, obviously for the values. But he was just saying that he copies a lot of the time. He'll just copy and paste anybody else that's done that as a planning application, and work ways of tweaking them, do a few bits in terms of the extensions and the permit development, and then tweak it around and copy and paste the bits and pieces. And he proclaims not to be an absolute guru or an expert. He just knows how to use Command C. yeah.
He just plays the game. So the second tip is always do not reinvent the wheel. If someone has done it and has got planning permission for it, then look at what they have done. Understand why they've got planning permission for it. And planning is the one discipline where you're actively encouraged to copy the nuts out of your neighbour's maths answers, right? If they can get it to work, so can you. And it's even better if you're doing housing developments. If there's a housing development just down the road that's just gone up, right, then it will have been approved in the last 3 years. You know that because it's just been built, and planning applications only ever last 3 years. So you can find its planning application. You'll also be able to go on Rightmove, find its sale comparables. You'll be able to look up its build comparables from Glenegan. You'll be able to get all of the data you ever need and copy the nuts out of it.
Yeah, and to be fair, we've used this recently actually. So just a quick sort of story that shows that I'm not just here just to sort of chat rubbish, but we've got planning in for a scheme of 13 units in South Leeds, and it originally had outline planning for 9. With 100% parking, so 9 parking spots. And then we'd seen that it had fallen under the city centre allocation, or the sort of city centre map, if you will, for the inner city. And there'd been a planning approval for some units down the road that had 50% parking. So we worked out that we could actually have fewer parking spots and therefore increase the size of the development. So that plot of land we can add a little bit more value ourselves by adding more units onto it. So that's it has worked for us up in the north, or hopefully it hasn't quite come through yet, but it's looking okay.
Brilliant. So exactly that. Number three is all about the developer. Build a bloody model. Right? Yeah. And I don't mean go and grab your children's Lego. Yeah. I mean learn the type of development you want to do, in the area you want to do it, understand the cost metrics, understand what you can get out of it, and build your model development around that. Some of the best developers I've ever worked with, and I'm still working with some of them, right? Some of the best developers I've ever worked with have one model of development. They're single modal, they're specialized. And they know for a given type of property that they can purchase at X price, it will cost 100,000 to do the works they want to do, and the property will value up to 500,000 when they're done.
Yeah.
And they know that with certainty. Because it's their own model, right? Yeah. And that is about really drilling into what specialism are you going to follow. So not go multimodal, not go multiple property strategy. That's about drilling into, I'm doing one model of development. And if you think about it this way, look at every major manufacturer, right? If you look at, let's go really obscure and go Nissan Renault. Right? Yeah. Nissan Renault make 9 different cars on different brands from one subframe design.
Really? Wow.
It's called badge engineering. If you want to know what badge engineering is, have a look at Wikipedia. But they make it off one subframe design, right? And you can see all the cars they make off one subframe design. The subframe that powers my beautiful little Dacia Sandero is the same that's in the Renault Clio, that's in all of the Renault EVs, that's in the Nissan Note, and in the Micra. They make all of those cars from one pattern.
Yeah.
Now, why can't you do that with development?
Yeah. Yeah, it saves all sorts of due diligence, and it saves all sorts of sort of time, not time wasting, if you will, but time leverage is a word that's obviously used quite a lot. But you obviously can leverage all the sort of past experiences that you will have in terms of, right, that's worked there, down the street, round the corner. I don't even need to sort of start clicking on spreadsheets. I just know it'll work on X plot of land with X bit of planning. Yeah, great bits of advice.
That's exactly it. The first rule in business, Simon, is to use the resources that you have. When you're dealing with development, the best resource you have is your history. And if you are able to build a model from your history, then you could just roll out development after development after development. And that's, without hyperbole, that's reality based on what we have seen and experienced, because you know your numbers will work and will transcribe from property to property to property.
Awesome bit of advice. Now, so they're the 3 relatively simple ones. Your 3 favourites. I think I put favourites down as a question, but I think we've gone for obscure ones. So I'm excited for these 3 obscure and favourite bits of planning, policy, and law that Do you use these, or have you just picked them out of a hat?
Well, the
Yeah.
three favourite bits of law. That's a good one. Fallback position case law I use a lot. Okay, it's
Right.
just been updated. It got updated in 2018. The fallback position is very simple. What you can do under PD, the planning authority should be giving you as a planning permission, right? If you're making little changes, so going just beyond PD into something else, the council will have to assess the difference. I've won so many points of appeal based on this principle, based on the argument that I can do it anyway. So where is the harm? What are the council actually trying to control? To the extent, and this will make you laugh, a few years ago, many years ago, I was dealing with an appeal against a borough council where they'd refused planning permission for something that was 10 centimetres higher than permitted development.
Right. Wow.
And I put in an appeal with a full award of appeal costs, a full award, and I knew I was going to win it. 10 centimetres is barely too small to count.
Yeah.
And I actually had a phone call from the head of service. He'd got hold of the appeal.
Yeah.
He'd looked at it and gone, we're going to get absolute fragging smacking at this.
Yeah.
So he phoned me and said, we shouldn't have refused this application on the strength of your appeal. We shouldn't have even gone there. Yeah. Can we persuade you to withdraw the application, withdraw the appeal, resubmit, and we'll determine the application in 4 weeks? So we'll speed it through rather than your client having to wait the mandatory 6 months. Spoke to the client. That's exactly what we did. Planning permission through. Jobs are good. Lovely. Fallback dealt with. Yeah. But that's one of my favourites.
Yeah.
The next I would probably say is what's called the consistency case law.
Okay.
So the consistency case law requires councils to be consistent inside of their own decision making unless other material considerations get in the way. Yeah. Now, what this does is require a council, once it's made a decision, to abide by that decision. All right. The only person who can change that decision then is an inspector if it goes to appeal, or the High Court if it gets quashed. And I've used this many, many times, utilising what we call our cycling planning strategy, which is where we submit one application in order to test the water. If it goes through, great. If it doesn't, fine. We've got our list, and we only have to deal with the list.
Yep.
And we utilise the consistency case law in order to force it through.
Yeah.
And the way one of my favourite examples of that is the Washington Public House in Barrow, but not the houses scheme that I always show when I'm training. It's the change of use to 31 bed HMO.
Yeah.
Or 32 bed. That was the first one. 32 bed.
Yeah.
That got approved with a flood risk assessment, and where the Environment Agency did not object. Okay?
Yeah.
They then put in an application to alter the interior arrangement and drop a bedroom out. So it went from a 32 to a 31. And the EA objected. And I saw the EA objection, toys completely out of the pram, case law book laid firmly at the planning officer's desk and saying, right, well, their objection doesn't make any sense then, does it? And the case law now provides, so you said this was fine, and the EA said it was fine last time round. You now have to abide by that decision. That's a decision made. And the case officer had to ring the EA and say, you didn't object last time, did you? No, we made an error. Doesn't matter. It's too late now.
Yeah, it's too late. Consistency. Yeah.
So
like
that's
wonderful.
Whenever a council is being inconsistent, fire consistency. Consistency is really, really good.
Absolutely. Perfect. And your third and final.
Oh dear. Where are we going with this? Adds authenticity. There is the dog.
There's the dog in the background. Yeah. It's been quiet for so long.
Oh no, she's done so well. The last bit is always tricky because there are so many that are enjoyable to use. But I think I would have to come back with compliance. So
Okay.
very simply, and we started with this, we may as well end it. We'll bring it full circle. A very simple rule that if you follow the rules, you get what you want.
Yeah.
Again, we've used this so many times with our clients where it's a case of every rule has been ticked. We just tick, 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 tick. Done. In, out, finished. And the one I do show as an example of compliance is a property down in Portsmouth where we applied for and got 5 flats in a retail to resi conversion with a bucket load of extensions on the building, new roof, mansard, dormers, basement level accommodation, literally the works, no car parking. All because we ticked every single box. Literally every box that we could fire at it, we fired at it. And the upshot was a very fast approval. A 7-week approval. Because what you're doing when you follow that compliance mode is you are taking the council's ability to object and turning it on its head. You're removing the harm. And when you remove the harm, you're demonstrating it's not harmful, and then the Planning Act works in your favour and says, well, if it's not harmful, you must grant planning permission for it.
So it was really interesting because if you're a newish developer or just even someone that is wanting to put an extension on the side of the house, as an example, planning is that mythical thing for a lot of people that when you don't know about it, that can be really scary and almost overwhelming in terms of the breadth and will we get it and all that sort of stuff. When you talk through the bits that you just talked through in the last 20 minutes, it's actually relatively simple. Now, I'm not, and I don't know all the laws, but I certainly have looked through and will look through more so in terms of the framework. But I'd also always recommend getting a very good PC in planning consultant, because when people know how, it not just speeds things up, it saves a lot of money, it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of sleepless nights, and it very much gets the job done. Because, as you've mentioned, once you've been into a council and you know how it works and you know compliance and consistency and fallback positions, it's a relatively simple process, and that's probably why you, as you've mentioned in the previous pod, why you have such a fantastically high success rate in terms of getting applications through and the right applications through.
That's it. I mean, planning is both an art and a science. The science component is knowing the law, the practice. The art component is knowing where the law and the practice can be flexed or twisted or manipulated in order to make things work well. You'll notice I haven't spoken about permitted development at all, and I haven't spoken about office to resi conversions, and that's because they're not my favourites. They're just par for the course, and I think that's a trap a lot of new developers tend to find themselves in is, I have to do this. Whereas actually you can make development work very well just by thinking slightly differently.
Yeah, ever so slightly. Yeah, completely agree. Well, I'll tell you what, John, I've really, really enjoyed that. There's some, I've been scribbling notes all the way through. I'm hoping we get to do this again at some point. I've really enjoyed it. I will let you have the final word to close out the Planning Game pod, which has been hijacked by Build in Progress. But thank you very much. And I'll let you have the final word, mate.
Thanks, Simon. Right, well, there you are, guys. There is the joint podcast between the Planning Game and Build in Progress. It's been an absolute pleasure to do it. This is the second podcast I've done with Simon. The first one we recorded not moments ago, where I told him all of my failings as a human being, which are many. I really hope you get to hear me again. And as always, I have no idea who my next guest is. It just happens that way. Simon, if they want to listen to the Building Progress pod, where can they find you, mate?
Oh, all the usual channels. We are on Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple, or the old iTunes store. Just give Building Progress a little search, and we should come up with a little yellow box and some bricks. Nice and easy, and easy to find. We're on Facebook, and I am on Instagram. I think it's Frewin Business. Fairly generic and boring name, but yeah, occasionally put on some useful information on there if you wish to find me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon, for joining me on the Planning Game, and I'll give him the final word.
It's a back and forth. Have a good evening, and thank you very much.